Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be introducing what we call Pythagoras' theorem. So Pythagoras' theorem applies to all right-angled triangles. Okay, right-angled triangles. Now you know that a triangle is a right angle triangle because you will see it has this little box or this little square in the corner of the triangle. When you see this, you know that it's a right angle triangle. Okay? Now, Pythagoras' theorem has a formula, and that formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, that is Pythagoras' theorem. This is the formula. All right. Now, if you have a look at the learning task that I've uploaded to Daymap, you'll see an explanation on that first page about how this formula is derived, but I'm just going to introduce it in terms of what the A, the B and the C means and what we label each side of the triangle before I get into, in this specific video, how to calculate an unknown side length. So basically you've got two sides, okay, that make up to the letter L, and then you've got a longer side that connects both of them together. Now, these two sides here are shorter than this long side, all right? And because these two are shorter, you know that they join together to make an L with a little box in between them, all right? Now, these two shorter sides refer to your A and your B, okay? Technically, it doesn't matter which one's which. It doesn't matter which one you call A. It doesn't matter which one you call B. I could call this side A or I could call it B. I could call this one here A or I could call it B. The only thing that matters is you are only allowed to call the longest side in the triangle your C. You are not allowed to make the longest side in the triangle an A or a B. It's only allowed to be a C. Okay, because in the formula, we've got A as an unknown variable, B as an unknown variable, and C. Okay, so the longest side is your C, and then you have your two shorter sides, and they can be either an A or a B. It doesn't matter which one's which, just as long as your two shorter sides are either your A or your B. So the very first thing that you're going to do when you calculate an unknown length is you are going to label the longest side as your C straight away and your other two as A or B, whichever you want. Now, this longest side over here actually has a specific name, and it is called the hypotenuse. All right, that is called your hypotenuse. So I'll make a little note of it down here. All right, and that's your longest side. All right, now if you want to pause the video here and copy down these notes into your book, you're more than welcome to. But now I'm going to go into showing you how to use the formula with some questions. So I've got 3 different questions. The first, use Pythagoras' theorem to find the length of the unknown side. So here they're actually telling us that we need to find A as the side. Now be careful, because in the document that I've uploaded uploaded to Daymap, I don't necessarily call all the sides A, B, and C. I call them other letters as well of the alphabet. So just as long as you know that the longest side is always C, the rest is fine. So in this example, we need to find A. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down that my longest side is this one over here. All right, so remember the two shortest sides join up to make the letter L, and they've got the little box in between them. So this is my longest side, and it's always opposite the right angle. So I'm going to write C here. And then this is obviously the A because that's what we need to find out. So the 40 is my B. So I've got A, B, C. So now we can write the formula down, and I'll do so in black so it's obvious. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. All right. Now all you're going to do is you are going to substitute these numbers into the formula. Now A, we don't know what A is. We're trying to find out A. All right. So A squared stays as it is. And then plus, because that's what comes next. And then we have B squared. Now B is 40. All right. So you're going to put 40 in where B is. So this will be 40 squared. And then you see an equal sign. So equals C squared. All right. Now C is 85. So you're going to put 85 in where you see C. And then there's a squared, so put a square on top of that. All right, so now that we've substituted our 40 and 85 in, we have A squared plus 40 squared equals 85 squared. All right, now this is where you need to use your knowledge of how to rearrange an equation to find an unknown pronumeral. And you also did this in financial maths, all right? So instead of us calculating what 40 squared is and what 85 squared is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole entire 40 squared and I'm going to minus it to the other side of the equal sign, all right? Because then if I move the 40 squared over here, that means I'm left with A squared by itself. So the reason why I'm going to minus the 40 squared is because at the moment it's plus 40 squared and the opposite of plus is minus. Now we did do this in financial math, so you should know this. The opposite of plus is minus. So I minus 40 squared to both sides. All right. So minus 40 squared, minus 40 squared, and then these two cancel out. And we're left with A squared, nothing there anymore, equals 85 squared minus 40 squared. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to square root both sides because the opposite of squared is a square root. The square root, square root. Because whatever you do to one side, you need to do to the other side. And then a square root and a squared cancels each other out. So I can cross that out, and I'm left with A by itself. So A equals the square root of 85 squared minus 40 squared. All right, and you literally put that in your calculator exactly how you see it. So I'll turn my calculator on. Now my square root sign is over here, so I'll click that. And I've got 85 squared minus 40 squared. It's exactly how it's written, okay? Press equals and you get 75. Okay, so A equals 75 millimeters. Okay, now I'll show you with the next question as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and label all my sides. Now be careful because look, this triangle's kind of upside down, so it's a little bit tricky to look at it in the same way as we have before. But to make it easier for yourself, if you get questions that are given to you like this, where they're upside down or they're drawn a funny way, move your piece of paper and view it. If it's easier for you, move your piece of paper like so and view it as if it was the way that you're used to seeing it. Okay, now if you're perfectly fine figuring out what all your sides are just by looking at it like this, go ahead. But if you're struggling to visualize things looking at this upside down triangle, move your piece of paper like this until it's the way that you like to see it. So I'm going to leave my page like this. Here I've got my L shape, so my two shortest sides. I've got my square in the corner telling me this is a right angle triangle, and opposite that we've got our hypotenuse, which is the longer side. So this is going to be C. We've already got a B labelled there, so this is A. Okay, so I'll just turn my page back around and let's write that formula. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I'll highlight that again. Okay, let's substitute in our numbers. Do we have an A? Yes, our A is 1, so 1 squared. Plus, do we have a B? No, so the B stays the same. Equals C squared. Do we have a C? Yes, it's 4.3. So 4.3 squared. Okay, now we need the B to stay on this side of the equal sign, so we need to move this 1 squared over to leave this here by itself. Now, what did we do in our previous example? Well, here, this is a positive 1 squared. What's the opposite of plus? Well, it's minus. So to get rid of this, we need to minus 1 squared to itself and on the other side of the equal sign. So minus 1 squared, minus 1 squared. Plus and minus cancel each other out, so they can go. And we're left with, well, nothing here now. So B squared equals 4.3 squared minus 1 squared. Okay. Now we need to get rid of the squared sign over here. How do we do that? Well, the opposite of squared is square root. So we need to square root both sides of the equation. So we'll square root here and we'll square root that. All right. Now, a squared and a square root cancel each other out. So cross out, and we're left with just B on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So B equals, and then we've got square root 4.3 squared minus 1 squared. What we're going to do again is put it straight into our calculator. So square root 4.3 squared minus 1 squared, exactly how I see it. Press equals, And we get a decimal answer this time. So B equals, and so we're going to go to 2 decimal places. So we'll chop off here. 4.18, don't forget your units. Centimeters. All right, so your very first step should always be writing down the formula when you're doing your working out. Obviously, before that, I'd like you to label the sides of your triangles because then it just makes it easier to know what you need to substitute in. But when you're doing the actual calculations, this needs to be your first step, okay? I've even made it very obvious by highlighting it. This needs to be your first step. Then you look to see which one of these letters you're given in your question, and you can go ahead and substitute those numbers in. When you're calculating a side length, it'll always be the A or the B that will be missing. So whichever one's missing, you either plus or minus, depending on whether it's a positive or negative number, and you move whatever number you have to the other side of the equal sign, and then you just square root both sides. So this is a process, okay? You just need to follow my steps, exactly what I'm doing for every single question. Now I've got one more. All right. Another example. Now again, if you're looking at this and it just doesn't make sense to you because of how I've drawn it or how the question's given to you, turn your page so that you can see it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. Now, I hope that you've noticed that with this question, we're actually given numbers in different measurements, okay? We're not allowed to calculate an answer that has a length in centimetres and then a length in millimetres. It needs to be in the same units. So, I mean, the question doesn't tell us which one it needs to be in, but let's just put it into centimetres, okay? So how do I change millimetres to centimetres? Millimetres to centimetres, you divide by 10, okay? So this is actually going to be 3.7 centimetres. All right. Now I can go ahead and label my ABC. Well, B is what we're trying to find out. Whatever's opposite the little box is the hypotenuse, so that's C, the longest side, and then this must be A. All right, so I've got my A, B, my C. Write down the formula as your very first step. And I'm highlighting it green to make it obvious to you guys that that should always be your first step. Okay, let's go ahead and substitute. Do we have an A? Yes, we do. It's 3.7. So we'll put 3.7 squared plus, the B is unknown, so the B stays as a B, and then equals C squared. Do we have a C? Yes, we do. It's 4.2. So it equals 4.2 squared. Now we want this B to stay. This is a positive 3.7 squared. So to get rid of this, we are going to minus 3.7 squared to both sides. And by both sides, I mean both sides of the equal sign, okay? So this can kind of be seen as your middle. And then positive 3.7 squared and minus 3.7 squared cancels each other out. And I'll actually show you by putting it in my calculator. I can show you that this actually cancels out. So 3.7 squared minus 3.7 squared equals 0. Okay, because the imaginary plus sign in front of here and this minus sign actually cancels each other out. So that's why I go straight ahead and just cross them out, because it's 0, it's nothing. And then that leaves us with our B squared equals 4.2 squared minus 3.7 squared. Okay, and then to get rid of a squared, you need to square root. So we'll square root both sides of the equation, so both sides of the equal sign, and then this squared cancels out with that square root. Okay, and I'll actually show you that as well. Let's just think of a random number. What about 9? If I do square root 9 squared on my calculator, so see how I've got the squared on the number and then I've also got the square root? Watch what happens when I press equals. I get left with just the number 9 because the square root cancels out with the squared. So that's exactly what we're doing here with the b. The square root is cancelling the squared and we're left with just the b. Okay, so b equals square root 4.2 squared minus 3.7 squared, and we can put that straight in our calculator how we see it. And we'll go to 2 decimal places. So b equals 1.99 centimetres.